It's 9:30, so I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the agenda be adopted as amended. Any issues with the agenda? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the minutes from the January 18th, 2023 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we have just the one-timed item today at 9:35, and we'll go straight to it. Ronda Stewart from the Rural Oxford Economic Development Corporation. And so first of all, welcome. Is your microphone on?
It is.
Is it?
It is.
Yeah? Okay, good. I'll turn it over to you, Ron.
Okay, can you hear me? Through the microphone? Yeah? Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, good morning. I'm Ronda Stewart. I'm the Economic Development Director for Rural Oxford Economic Development Corporation. Take a pause there because it's a mouthful. Really happy to be here with you this morning. And I might just, I won't mix you up, Stephanie, with the slides, but I might just mix up the order that I share the information, if that's okay. Okay. A little bit about Rural Oxford Economic Development. We're a nonprofit economic development agency that started in 2014. Just before that, in 2012, 2013, there was a Rural Oxford Economic Committee, Prosperity Committee, that had met. They worked with a bunch of different community partners, brought in OMAFRA, and did what's called a BR&E, or Business Retention Expansion Study. One of the key findings from that original BR&E was that having representation, having staff support, focusing on the needs of the rural communities outside of the urban centers was a priority that this committee wanted to see move forward. So at that time, they decided to formalize the Rural Oxford Prosperity Committee. And at the time, 4 of the 5 rural townships came on board in equal partnership, and the formation of Rural Oxford Economic Development came into existence. So 1 year later, the 5th township came on board, and since that time, 2015, we've been operating with a complement of support from all 5 rural townships. I think the annual contributions just gone up. I think each municipality contributes around $40,000 towards our annual budget, and that might be going up to $45,000 this year. As well, each council reaches out to their communities each year and will appoint 2 representatives to serve on our volunteer board of directors. The function of the board is oversight, financial management, or financial oversight, governance oversight, and setting strategy for our small but mighty team. Most of our councils do appoint 1 elected official and 1 business community member. The discretion is totally up to council as to who you want to appoint. You can appoint for 2-year terms, and directors can sit on our board for up to 10 years without, I guess, requiring a changeover or a 1-year break. Zorra is the only township that does not have a council member appointed to the board. Just thought I would mention that. You have 2 fine business community representatives serving on our board. And that kind of, again, goes to show you can mix and match this however you'd like. So with Rural Oxford Economic Development, our primary focus is to serve the 5 rural townships that span across the 2,000 square kilometers in Oxford. And there's myself, Crystal Van Roekel, who are the core team, and then from time to time, or project-based, we'll bring in consulting support. So we have another consultant, Tiffany Roshkoff, who will help work on some of our workforce initiatives. our main focus right now with rural Oxford, looking at the landscape and the environment that we're in, is working with and supporting the existing business community. I think that there are ebb and flows to economic development. There are times to focus on investment attraction, but currently, the landscape and everything that we've seen and heard over the last few years, our main focus is working with the existing business community, helping them find plug in at to the supports that are available. Sometimes we're triage, sometimes we're consulting, sometimes we're helping navigate the permit process, and other times we're just doing a big news splash and marketing campaign to share the awesome things that are happening in our rural Oxford townships. So just thought I would share a little bit about that before I dive into what might appear to be just random numbers. Thank you. And I did just cut 3 slides off the back. So in 2022, so a lot of times economic development is sometimes difficult to quantify. There's, quantifiable measures, and then there's qualitative measures. So we do our best. I always err on the side of caution, so any number that you might see presented is low versus high. I will not overinflate anything. It does not serve you or me next year when I'm calculating our numbers. So there are a lot of general and marketing inquiries that our team has fielded this year, 272 of those. That will not include anybody who text messages me or messenger, Facebook messengers, anything like that. There's a lot more that goes into communicating with the community, but I think it's important to be accessible. We've provided support to 23 expansion inquiries, 53 land and development inquiries. Those could be existing businesses from within or helping companies from GTA, Kitchener, Waterloo, Stratford area that are kind of applying the pressure this way. One from Quebec, but mainly it's all being GTA pushing this way, for our office at least. We had the benefit of Tiffany this year working with us, so we did fully maximize that. We do not generally get to do 111 business visits or drop-ins. That was exceptional. We took that as a marketing and outreach strategy and to help tie together our rural entrepreneurs and invite people to come out to our networking events. Just after coming out of COVID, everything being online, we thought a face, a handshake, a personal invitation would go a long way, and it did definitely serve us well. And as we crawl back out of the pandemic, I did attend 2 trade shows this year as part of the Oxford Connection group. The impact measured, I just like to explain, the 275 million is actually 290 million plus. That is private sector funding. So what we'll do at the end, we'll work with a variety of companies throughout the year, some greater depth than others. But at the end of the year, I'll reach back out to those companies that stand top of mind who were working on an expansion or development. And I'll reach out to them and say, would you mind sharing how much you invested this year? And so that is the number that came back. I got another 13.5 million after I printed this in responses from other companies. This is a snapshot. I mean, once you get to 50 million, who's counting, right? So investment grant supported, so there were 2 companies, one in Norwich and one in Zorra that did receive significant funding through upper level government funding like FedDev or the SWATF, Southwestern Ontario Development Fund, sorry for the acronym. So that 5.5 million is just the amount that was approved for the grant coming in. That's not necessarily the amount that will be spent on those projects. 7 grand opening announcements. I'm sure, again, there are more, but we're a small team, and we get out to as many as we can. And then we also hosted Oxford Rural Entrepreneurs events. We planned on doing 5. We ended up running 7. Next slide, please. 240 guests collectively attended these. When I broke down the number of businesses and community partners that were represented, so not to double count, we were at 100 businesses connected over those 7 networking events. We did run most of them outdoors, and we brought a unique spin on having our venue hosts share a little bit about their business and give us little tours and little tasting and sampling of product or food nearby. So it's very well received, and we actually just are in the throes of launching our next series for 2023. We've done a couple of video series over the last 2 years. I'd say this is kind of a rolling project. We did receive Community Economic Development Project of the Year for our We Grow Together series. This is a fantastic series. We've actually done 2 rounds of this We Grow Together. I encourage you to check out our brand new website, just launched last week, and go to your individual community's page. We have broken out rural Oxford and highlighted each of the communities with some stats, some information about Zorra specifically, and an incredible Rolodex of videos of the people in your community who are operating businesses. We're very proud of both the We Grow Together series, the Oxford Shopping Channel series, and our Welcome to Oxford County series. So all of those were pieces we wanted to put together to visually show and tell who each of our communities are, and because all 5 of you are different. And that was one of the things I imagined when I got here. And I guess the pandemic in one way was a blessing because it allowed us the opportunity to work on these digital assets in a pretty fast way. So 3 years in the making, but I really hope that you go to your page on our website and enjoy it and comment. This Welcome to Oxford County fam tour, this is an overarching video for each of the 8 municipalities in Oxford County, as well Future Oxford and the South Central Ontario region. So we've actually put together and submitted this series for an award with the Economic Development Council of Ontario, and we actually have been nominated. So we'll find out next week if we actually received an award for this video series in partnership with all of the Oxford County Economic Development Group, South Central Ontario region, and Oxford County through their Future Oxford initiative. So we're really excited about that, showcasing our uniqueness and our collaboration. Hand in hand, that Oxford County fam tour or familiarization tour, that video series ran behind schedule, but it's beautiful, so that's okay. We actually intended to have that roll out before the actual in-person came back, but instead we just adapted, and we used the video series to complement the in-person fam tour that Oxford Connections Group has been running for the past, 30 years. So we did tour around 50 guests, realtors, developers, site selectors, ministry representatives, and some local elected officials at the in-person fam tour in September. I guess we basically put everyone on a bus and drive them around to some cool stops in Oxford County. We have a fantastic networking event and some social time together, really showcasing, and we give them beautiful gift baskets. So really showcasing a lot of the sweet spots in Oxford County. I think this one's self-explanatory. The CL in food show, that's Oxford Connection Group. They receive some funding from Oxford County every year, about $50,000, and that is towards investment and attraction activities. So that will typically cover the cost of the booth, the cost to register for a trade show. Rural Oxford, in our budget, if I were to go to a trade show, my time, my meals, my accommodations and travel would come out of the rural Oxford budget. So that's kind of our contribution to this partnership. And so with that, I try to be thoughtful as to which trade shows I go to. So there are some great trade shows that Oxford Connection has on the docket for this year: plastics, food show. I think there's another, but obviously the food show is one that I'll raise my hand for each time because it's relevant to what we do and our communities. So moving on, there are a few announcements. tried to make the presentation very visual. Grand acquisition, so of that 290 million I mentioned earlier, the number's a little slanted this year, just giving the acquisition announcement of Linamar purchasing Salford Group. That is a fantastic, fantastic win for our communities as a whole. Linamar Group invests, like they invest to win. They invest to play. They're not just sitting on their laurels. They are investing into and growing the Salford Group book of their portfolio. Some grand openings. I think obviously you're aware of community counseling and family support in Thamesford. There's Red Dragon Dairy in Salford, Jordan's Divine Dish and Catering in Norwich. As well, last year, Premier Equipment opened in Norwich. We also had the Terra Nova Nordic Spa and Raja Thai and Indian cuisine in Tavistock. So, lots of great news stories clear across rural Oxford County. One of the projects. So one of the other things. I hope I'm not going over too much on time. Am I okay? Okay. So one of the things that I really pride our team on is trying to scan the environment, scan the supports available, look at what we're hearing from the business people in rural Oxford, and filling the gaps. We're not hoping to duplicate efforts. We really do. From time to time, it's going to happen, but we really do make every effort to create projects that are going to just boost and support and not overlap. So if we see there's a direct, a project that directly overlaps with something that we're doing, we would reach out to those individuals to see if there's a way we could partner, support each other. So I just think that's important to know. So if there's, and we collaborate a lot. So Community Futures Oxford and Tourism Oxford, we have a natural synergy with these three organizations and the types of clients and businesses that we have in our 5 townships. So last year we did partner with the Tourism Innovation Grant, which was originally an initiative from Tourism and Community Futures. And they put out this innovation grant, and they did this call for applications, and they asked if I would just sit on the panel at the very end. And it turned out all 3 of the candidates who did their pitch were all rural companies, and they only had 2 $3,000 grants to give. And well, my stomach was just turning. I just, quietly asked, may I please just contribute the 3rd grant, because these are all fantastic businesses, and they're standalone. They're not apples and apples. So anyway, so we contributed $3,000, and all 3 of the rural companies were able to receive the grant with the tourism business support and the coaching. Combined, those companies invested $1.5 million, created 13 jobs, and received over 5,000 new visitors to their businesses in 2022. So that one was an easy win for us. I just was very happy to be invited to be a partner. So this year, Community Futures and Tourism has reached back out and said, come on, just be a partner with us on this one. So we try to support our rural employers, and many of them are hiring. Again, I just grabbed some visuals that we shared out on social media. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of the companies who are hiring in Oxford County. So we try to keep good relations and rapport with the existing community services, Community Employment Services, Tilsonburg Multi-Service Center, Women's Employment Resource Center, even Leeds. We try to support their initiatives, and then again, if there's a gap, we will work directly with the company as requested to help them with their own job fair needs. And that, I think, I think we'll go right next to Canada's Outdoor Farm Show. So we wanted to find a meaningful way to support Canada's Outdoor Farm Show. And what we decided to do this year was we staffed on one of the days, they have 6 information booths all throughout this massive event, this outdoor event. And so we actually offered to coordinate all of the volunteer information booth staff for one of the days. That was like herding mice, but Crystal did an amazing job on that one. So we had a lot of our, several of our board members and community partners, our team, and even some economic development partners from outside of the region saw the benefit and drove and came and staffed these booths with us this year. I personally wasn't exactly sure what to expect at this event, so I was very, very grateful that we engaged in this way. And I think, it's a benefit to the whole community when you know when to lead and when you know when to plug in and try to offer meaningful support. So that's what we tried to do there. I did return 2 children to their families. So we've done all sorts of local marketing and communications. Again, where we can partner and promote, we will. We did, it was a natural synergy on that Oxford Fresh map. I don't know if you've seen those Oxford Fresh maps, if you're handing them out, but wow, what a gem. We took a whole panel. It was just, if you just look at the companies on these Oxford Fresh maps, it's obvious that that panel we should be on. And it's just a fantastic local resource to be sharing, and we're proud to be sponsor of that. We do have currently 3 of our 5 billboards around the community are out on different properties that just have our logo, and sometimes those roadside signs get us quite a few calls. We partner with tourism, small business center, community futures on the Shop Local, Shop Oxford, on, of course, our Oxford Rural Networking events. And yeah, our social media stats have grown significantly this year across all of our platforms. We focused on writing 16 rural business stories, and on our blog page you'll see different community updates, projects we're working on, programs that are being released from upper level governments or local level partners, and as well these business features that we're trying to highlight to showcase all the cool people and businesses in our communities. And with that, there's a lovely photo of most of our board and us at Christmas. I did include a photo of the 3 of us. Tiffany's a little shy. You won't see her on our website, but that is genuinely because she is shy in that regard. And the last slide I just put together, in addition to the little video that I tried to, the little DIY video that I sent out for all of you, just to give you a bit of background on us. I did find a few videos on the introduction to economic development for elected officials. What is economic development and why invest in economic development? One of them super cute. If you haven't seen the Lego video, please watch it. It's adorable. But yes, with that, I just wanted to provide, I know a few of you are new, so I wanted to just make sure that you had all the resources at your fingertips and that, you can call me. Love to have a coffee sometime and hear your ideas, and I'm here to serve you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Questions from council? Crystal. Oh, sorry, Councillor Finch.
I just want to comment, this is amazing. I absolutely love everything about this. Harnessing, working together with the community is exactly what we want. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thanks as well. Definitely gives us some resources to reach out to. I just wanted to understand maybe, and certainly would talk a lot more in depth, but if at a high level you could summarize sort of the challenges to bringing businesses in. What are the biggest barriers you commonly see? Either that's local residents trying to start a business or bringing outside businesses into our rural areas. Just a few top points typically.
Oh, I've got a few.
Okay. Have at it.
First and foremost, one of the initiatives we're going to be, I guess, trying to lay a baseline foundation this year is we have this investment readiness toolkit, and we've taken a PDF of this investment readiness survey, and we're going to be sharing it out with staff and asking for them to provide input on investment readiness and answering the questions basically to get a baseline of each community's investment readiness. first and foremost, I'm going to tell you for our rural communities, and where, as far as I'm concerned, as your marketing arm to promote development opportunities, in a regular business environment, we are behind. We are behind in not having municipally owned serviced shovel-ready land, just in a regular environment. In this current environment, with the prices as they are, not having service land, I will give you one example. I was working on a deal for 2 years and with a private landowner, and we finally got very close to signing the dotted line, and the industry across the street had an expansion, and they used up the rest of the wastewater pump station capacity. Thereby, this new company couldn't come in and take 5 acres for their sales and service business. So 2 year deal in the making, gone, because again, the service land is not here. That would be my first. So we want to put together this investment readiness survey, kind of get a baseline. We'll work hand in hand with planning to understand, what they see as Oxford on a whole. I would say a lot of the inventory of land, from my perspective, is that there's a 20-year projection on employment land and residential land needs. And we have some really weird grandfathered parcels of land that have the zoning that qualifies them as future employment land, but they're not actually practical to put employment land there. Residents are being built up all around it. Who's actually going to use that industrial slated parcel for industry? The community's not going to allow that in, but it's sitting in the reserve. Therefore, we don't need to create new parcels of reserve. Again, from my perspective, I see that as a barrier. The other thing I would say is a general misunderstanding, and I try to work with the businesses to help them understand the different layers around the planning. And when they live on an agricultural lot or want to buy a piece of, they see vacant land and they have dreams. I understand that. Helping them to bridge the gap between understanding what's permitted. And I know planning does a great job of explaining this to them, but sometimes they just, I try to soften that communication, and we're actually working with planning right now to work on some communication pieces to help everyday people like us to be able to understand why I can't do that, so that when planning, they call planning and they say, can I do this? And all they hear is no. That's all they hear, and they go, oh, I can't do this. But it's much more complex than that, and planning they need a break sometime. Not gonna lie. So we're hoping to be able to work together with them to roll out some communication pieces to help soften the expectation or the gap in understanding on what you can do on a parcel of land or not. Also, we're all currently waiting for the province to send us back our approved official plan. There was a lot of work that went into the agriculture policy reviews, which will allow additional uses on agricultural, rural residential uses and all of that. But until the province sends Oxford County back the official plan, which they removed their accountability measures, I understand. So originally they had a certain timeline that they had to provide it back, and now they've said we'll get it back to you when we get it back to you. So Oxford County and the planning team are kind of at the mercy of waiting for the province to be able to switch over to this new permitted uses. And once those new policies drop, if everything's approved, then we may have a little bit more flexibility to work with and communicate. Sorry if that was too much.
No, that was perfect. Just one thing to add. A lot of that was about sort of outside of town, around the edges of towns, or in different zones within the municipalities. What about in village cores and that kind of thing, to try to drive smaller businesses into those areas?
Into village core?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to think on that one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just before I go to you, Paul, if I could just follow up to one of Kevin's questions. So you mentioned these grandfathered little weird parcels of land that are technically supported under planning for industrial development, say, but you feel that they wouldn't necessarily actually be supported for it by the time they actually went through a planning process, a public process. Not asking for what the examples are, but there are specific examples.
Yes.
Do you think that's something I think that's something that the councils that fund ROEDC would be interested in getting some kind of report on, because it very much informs the discussion at local councils, but at county council as well, about what actually our land needs are.
Yeah.
And if there are parcels that we think, frankly, exist in our land needs inventory, but would not functionally actually be developed in that way,
Yeah.
we need to know that, notwithstanding what the ultimate decision would be, but I think we need to know that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that, from my perspective, that ROEDC can help inform councils on is, you think this is what your land needs are, and technically that may be true strictly in a planning envelope,
Yeah.
but when we hear from, our businesses, our potential investors, they look at some of those and say, no, those are not what I want. So if we've got them zoned a certain way, but nobody wants them, we're kind of missing the boat there, right? So I think we need to hear that. I think we would benefit from hearing, formally from ROEDC,
Yeah.
that there are parcels that we've shopped with people and they specifically do not want those. So we need to look at those, and say, well, what do we do with them then?
Yeah. No, I fully understand.
We would very much welcome that kind of, Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was heading too, because what you said about these parcels that were zoned industrial, commercial years ago, and they're no longer suitable, but we got this big push on for residential land, and then you talked about working with Oxford Planning. Is this some of your discussion with Oxford Planning? And I agree with the mayor that that's something that needs to come through the council level, but has there been discussion with county planning about, okay, this property is not zoned for what it should be used for now?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Absolutely. So a lot of this, I actually have I call planning a lot. So I have spoken with April and Paul with the policy side of things, which is where some of this comes up. And I would, we kind of have a really open conversation, open channel or communication channel to discuss case studies, if you will. So if I identify something and I've got question marks, and we'll run through like a case study scenario example without all the specifics. But what I found, so just to clarify, some of the weird zoning is like on agricultural parcel or agribusiness parcel, future use slated. So it doesn't mean, I mean, we're still at the mercy of the existing landowner. We're still at the mercy of what the new landowner might want to do with it. But there's just a few parcels where I really just don't see, with the amount of residents coming into some of these areas, I really don't see how an industrial use would be welcomed by the community, right? So the zoning might be there and somebody might buy it with every full intention to develop it in that way. But with the all of the residential units coming in, I mean, I don't want a factory across the street from my house. So if I build my house first, that's just one more voice at that table appealing it, right? So but absolutely, I'm working with, and I pick up the phone and call development planners all the time on specific files. But yes, we have started the conversation is the short answer.
That's really interesting new information that, we got all this land set aside for industrial, commercial, residential, and we got all these pressures to develop all three of those things.
Yeah.
But you're telling us that some of this land that we think is slated for that is no longer suitable, and we should shift it to something else. But then again, to replace what's not suitable, we need to find land somewhere else to fill that void too, so to make those future expansion numbers work.
Yeah, that is honestly why you haven't received a formal report. Like, some of this does feel a little bit like chicken and egg, and I'm not shy to call and ask questions when I get stumped. So like, even for the case in point with regards to transportation companies and having a transport truck or two, everybody's saying that has to be like, the official plan says that has to be on an MG or industrial zoned property, and that most of them are in Woodstock, Ingersoll, Tillsonburg, those communities don't want that kind of development. They want employers, like larger employers than a truck yard or a truck wash station or a truck service station or whatever. So we're at this like perfect position at the 401, 403 transportation corridor, and it just seems to be we're chasing tails, like, oh, you need to send that development there because the official plan says so, and then the limited land available at Ingersoll, Tillsonburg, Woodstock, well, that's not quite the project we want to land here. So it's an interesting time for what I'm observing.
I have two questions that are more Zorra specific. You talked about the board. Who are the two representatives for Zorra on the board?
Doug Turvey and Rob Parkhill.
Rob
Parkhill,
Park. Okay.
yes.
And the other one, when you did the bus tour, where did you stop in Zorra?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't.
Assuming you did stop in Zorra.
I don't believe that they did. I actually didn't go on the bus. I was too afraid to get COVID. So, I drove to the spot where I was supposed to get on the bus, say my blurb, and get back off.
Okay.
So, full transparency
So
there.
this year will be on the tour.
So this year, so what they did, I believe they went from Ingersoll, so they left Elmhurst Inn, they went up through to Woodstock, somewhere in Woodstock, down, is it 59, down by, by VDK, down there to Tillsonburg, and then back to Oxford Hills. So if there were other stops within there, I don't have them off the top of my head.
Okay.
Good question.
Anyone else? So a couple things. So first of all, the chicken and egg analogy is a pet peeve of mine because eggs absolutely came before the chicken, right?
I said that just for you.
Yeah. Chickens evolved from dinosaurs. Sorry, I can't help it. But also in this context, I would suggest that this is the egg, right? So this is what councils are supposed to do. Is we have our economic development groups, we have our planning groups, and council's job is to say, okay, we've divided this stuff up so that we can manage them. But council's job is to say, but where's the overlap here, right? And how do we do? So the egg has just been laid here in terms of the economic development and the planning overlap, and how do we address it? So
Yeah.
I think you've heard from members of council here that they're interested in that, and that conversation. And it won't be a quick one, right? Because changing zoning bylaws is one thing, changing the OP is another thing, and then waiting for the province to approve your OP for 7 months.
7 months,
And they're
yeah.
not going to approve it. Like, what we're going to get is going to be different than what we submitted. We know that now. That's just a fact. That's what's going to happen. So it's not going to be quick work. All the more reason to start it sooner rather than later.
Yep.
So I think the first step would be for probably all the ROEDC municipalities to be better informed about those details. And from an economic development perspective, not only those orphan parcels, those grandfathered parcels that you think would not be useful, but from an economic development perspective, what are our land use needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Types as well as area and all those things, right? And then have that discussion with planning and say, how do we think this fits together, right? Council's job is to let these things not go off into silos that don't talk. I'm not saying that you don't, because I know that you do. Mm-hmm. But council's job is to resolve that and say, so how do we move? Because again, our residents don't care, right? Our residents don't care about, Zorra Council versus County Council versus planning versus ROEDC. It's just results. So we have to figure out a way to put all that together and get the results. So I want to really thank you for bringing that to our attention. Also, a couple of numbers that I just made note of while you were through the presentation. So at $40,000 for each member municipality, that's $200,000 a year, I think, is the base funding for ROEDC, right?
I think it just went up to 240, but yeah.
Okay. Let's go with, for the sake of my numbers, because I did the math
Oh,
already.
yes,
let's stick with
200, absolutely.
yeah.
2022 was $201,000.
But even, and then if you take out the Salford investment out, which is not fair, but let's just say,
Yeah.
take it out, that leaves us at 40 million that was invested in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So at 200,000, and then 40 million left if you take just 10% of that, let's say some of that would have happened anyway, and the only bit that ROEDC actually made happen was 10% of it, that's $4 million,
Right.
right? Which means ROEDC leveraged 200,000 into 4 million, very conservatively, right? Like very conservatively. So in terms of a spend for this council to put forward in economic development, very hard to argue that it isn't worth upping it to the 240,
Thanks.
frankly, right? To say, so I mean, so 4 million might come back next year at like 5 million. I mean, that's just absolutely money well spent. And the last point I would make is that even if you're a large municipality, even on a provincial or a national scale, the largest employer of Ontarians, Canadians is small businesses, right?
Yes.
The small business that hires one person doesn't not get front page on London Free Press or on the CTV News or whatever, but they are the largest employers. So every time economic development groups like ROEDC get someone to go from this is my side hustle to I'm going to quit my job and sell coffee full time now, and then hire a person and then hire another person and then open a shop, right? That's happening in a whole bunch of places all over the place. That adds up to more than what we attracted and opened a factory that isn't going to actually spend money locally here anyway. So this is an amazing legacy for the councils that came together at the time and decided to actually, do the work that you said and go from a committee to a corporation and actually hire people and actually do this. And those numbers bear it out that, 200,000 spun into very conservatively 4 million is, who wouldn't do that, right? I mean, that's a no-brainer. But it wasn't a no-brainer at that time. So credit to them and credit to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you. I'm also, 2022 was a really proud year for me. I am officially Rural Oxford Economic Development Corporation's first employee. So we, up until that point, had just contract work. And I've had 1 full year as an actual employee, and we're just getting started. If I can just leave you with one thing, it's a sneak peek on our website. We have just launched our Oxford Rural Entrepreneurs Networking event series. You're welcome to jump on there and register before anybody else knows. And we are going to be rolling out Rural Oxford Shopping Channel series. We're going to actually, Crystal, in the summer, will be going out and filming another 10 video features. So if you can think of, if you see your page and you think, somebody needs to be on there, please shoot me an email. Thanks.
I did, but I was willing to it wrapped up so beautifully that I thought I'll just follow up with Ronda later, but you saw me, so here we go. I just had, you'll see, this really undoes a beautiful package in the worst of ways. Sorry. I just had a question about the board appointments. So Paul had asked who our 2 current sitting members are. So where are they in their terms, and what's that process for appointment?
That is an excellent question. So each of them are just around halfway as if you're looking at a 10-year horizon, which we've only recently added into the policies. It's often, so if council would like to appoint, you can appoint any 2 people that you would like. So I would suggest reaching out to each of the candidates and asking them. Or if you want to go another direction, reaching out to each of the candidates and letting them know you'd like to go a different direction. And you have that full power to appoint whomever you'd like. At our June AGM and board meeting, so at our June AGM is when the appointment would actually, or the transition would actually take place. And so they would come on, I believe, for a 2-year, whomever the 2 people you appoint would come on for a 2-year term and start their 10. So the 2 directors are at about halfway of a 10-year horizon. But yeah, that's how you would just appoint them, and I would be notified, and I would let the chair know, and it would be in the AGM minutes, and yeah.
So they serve 2-year terms for a maximum of 10 years.
Yes.
So are they currently, in June, are those 2-year terms renewing? And then do we reappoint them, or is that done internally through, like, I'm just wondering, does this come to council? Do we normally do this through council? I can't remember the,
Yeah. Usually like after this, so we'll have a board meeting in February, and then usually it's an art, not a science. Usually after the February board meeting, I'll reach out to each of the councils to just nudge them to say, who would you like to appoint? And then generally you guys have an in-camera conversation about who you would like to appoint, and then I get notified after that. And then at the AGM, we basically ratify your appointments because, they're your appointments.
Anyone else? Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that item 7A, ROEDC annual review and council training presentation be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And reports from staff, 8.1 fire. So the chief's not here, on our way to the airport. Does anybody have any questions on that report? Staff are obviously, Karen will answer as best she can, take notes and pass them on to the chief, and we'll get the answers, but feel free. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2023-016 from the fire chief be received and filed for information purposes only. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. You're going to message her or not, or no? Thank you. And 8.2 Recreation Department, report 2023-014 from the Recreation Facilities Program Coordinator regarding monthly recreation report for January 2023. And Steph, thank you for filling in. And is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Not particularly. I just want to make sure we noted the comparison of numbers of rentals dated back to 2020 when we haven't had a January since that has been a great reflection of this current month's numbers. So this was an accurate reflection of sort of what's normal, if you will.
Questions from council? Councillor Finch.
Just seeing that you had a co-op student Lanny in, that's fabulous. Do you let the schools know that we do the co-op program? And if not, is there a way that we can do that?
Yeah, we don't actively reach out to schools. We have these students because they have an interest in that facility, so they reach out to us. We've had a variety of different interns for different interests, and they reach out to us because they recognize that's a skill that they might want to develop further. So we don't actively reach out to them or the school specifically to get these co-op students.
I just recall back when I was in school and looking for co-ops, sometimes the guidance counselor struggled to find facilities that would take kids. Mm-hmm. So maybe an option for us to reach out to the guidance department at high schools and just
it's
let them aware.
Definitely worth it. I know we have other departments that also use co-op students, so it might be a township-wide initiative to look into further.
Anyone else? Councillor Stewart.
I think it's probably more of a question for Dan, possibly, but maybe you'd have an answer too. With this Amelia, which is, I understand, like our sort of tracking software that we're using and has hiccups and that kind of thing, which is understandable. Will we be able to better project revenues on like ice time? I noticed in the budgeting timelines, we didn't have official numbers from last year to look at or anything for year to date or anything like that. Will this software give us better insight come next budget term?
And that is a review that we're conducting in 2023 between the two softwares, between the financial and the recreation, and getting processes in place to be able to make sure that's in a timely fashion.
Anyone else? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that report 2023-014 from the Recreation and Facilities Program Coordinator be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Steph. And Building and Drainage, no items. And 8.4 Public Works. Report 2023-013 from the Director of Public Works regarding monthly Public Works report. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight for council in that?
Not at this time, thanks.
Questions from council? Easy day for staff today. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2023-013 from the Director of Public Works be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And nothing from Finance. 8.6, Corporate Services Department. A, report 2023-010 from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk regarding council policies review. And Alicia, is there anything you want to highlight for council in there?
I just wanted to make one note about our accountability and transparency policy. So in section 4.1C, it said an annual budget and 5-year capital forecast, but that should have been changed to 10-year capital plan.
Thank you. I do have a motion here, but before I get to the motion, any questions on this report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just one, Alicia, and that is the replacement of a council member. What's the timeline from when a vacancy is declared to someone needs to be appointed or was set a date for a by-election?
So the Municipal Act lays out the timelines that we need to adhere to for both declaring a vacancy and for filling it. The municipality has to declare a vacancy at the next meeting or the meeting after that, depending on the circumstances of the vacancy. In terms of filling a vacancy, it depends on the method of which the vacancy is filled, whether it's appointment or through a by-election. But I calculated how long would be the maximum, and it would be about 5.5 months if a by-election were to occur. Maximum.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Questions on the report? So I have then moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that the policies outlined in report 2023-010 have been reviewed by council, and that council directs staff to make the following changes. Section 1.0 of policy 100-02, deputy mayor appointment to be amended to appoint the deputy mayor at the inaugural meeting of council. Section 4.1C of policy 100-08, accountability and transparency, be amended to read, an annual budget and 10-year capital budget is prepared for council's consideration on an annual basis. Councillor Stewart, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that? Deputy Mayor Grigg? Anybody else? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I know it's not terribly exciting to most people, but I think I'm a pretty weird mayor, but I love that stuff. I think the longer you do this job, that kind of stuff helps you sleep at night, to know that that's being done, that people are, smart, educated people are looking at that stuff and making sure that it's done and it's done right, and constant little tweaks to it as we go along means that you don't go way off the rails. So I think I'm not expecting that any of us are going to get calls from residents about it, but that's important stuff, right? Everything else we do is rests on that stuff, keeping us on the straight and narrow. 8.6B, report 2023-017 from the bylaw enforcement officer regarding quarterly bylaw report. And Karen, is there anything you want to highlight in that report for council?
I just wanted to note that the years, like the 2022, 2021, 2020 are the annual years, not the annual number, not just the January numbers, and then 2023 are the January numbers, just to clarify that.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
So if we were looking at around 80 for the 12 months, and now we're looking at 25 for 1 month, if you multiply, are we looking at basically a doubling of bylaw enforcement actions, or is it a bit of an anomaly?
Yeah, I think just there was a kind of a big lull between MEU and then our current officer starting, so he's kind of been cleaning up a few months worth of backlog and doing a few more parking enforcements than we would have had, and so I don't foresee it continuing like this, but it's more just kind of cleanup that he's been doing.
So the January numbers are kind of like October, November, December.
Right,
January
yes,
numbers.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else on that report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2023-017 from the bylaw enforcement officer be received and filed for information purposes only. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And is Dawn available? Yeah. So 8.6C, report 2023-018 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Central Thamesford Land Use Review. Dawn, are you connected? No, not yet. Okay.
Are you there, Don?
So, Dawn, is there anything you want to highlight for council in this before I ask them for questions?
No, I would leave it open for questions from council.
Questions from council on the report? Not seeing any, I will read the motion. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart. Whereas protection of prime agricultural lands is vital to our collective future, and whereas a shortage of high-density, attainable housing inventory, especially high-density, contributes to the housing crisis, and whereas Zorra Township values healthy, safe, and inclusive communities, therefore be it resolved that council support a review with the intention of amending the county official plan and Zorra zoning bylaw, that staff be directed to work with county planning staff to develop a work plan to review core areas in both Thamesford and Embro to consider opportunities for increased high-density residential and expanded commercial zoning, and that the areas of review include the existing village as well as the impact of the areas of new development, and that this work plan be brought back to Zorra Council for consideration. Deputy Mayor Grigg, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, please. I think this is especially an interesting discussion to have after our presentation from ROEDC this morning. It is great that we have these policies and land use policies in place to guide appropriate development for healthy, balanced communities. But I think at times it does benefit us to stop and assess how they're functioning and where there's opportunities to change. So as laid out in the report, there's a lot of residential development happening in Thamesford, and so this is a great time to see what lands will we have available for those businesses that are going to provide the goods and services that our community has been desiring. And we're going to see that population grow where we'll be able to sustain hopefully a lot of these businesses, but there needs to be the appropriate spaces for these businesses to be able to operate. And then we also need to have that variety of housing. We are highly concerned with the housing crisis, and I believe the number is 319 acres of farmland are taken out of production every day in Ontario as an average, and that's significant, and we do have a role that we can play in how we manage our development to help do our part to preserve that farmland. So what we're looking at, what has been suggested here by staff, and I think is an excellent start, is a review of what that zoning and designated lands are, and what they could possibly change to and what those impacts could be, so that as we continue to grow, we have a village that is not going to be creating new problems that we have to figure out how to solve, but hopefully growing in a healthy, sustainable way that's not even going to allow those problems to happen. So it's a bit of modification potentially to what we have, and then also factoring in what is yet to come. I think as we're learning about, it's the planning department that has the tools and the knowledge of exactly how we can best leverage our intentions for the growth of our community. I'd like to also then be looking at Embro. Those are our two main villages in the municipality, and whatever tools we're able to apply to one, if we're able to apply them to the other. Embro has some growth restrictions because of capacity, but it is still growing. So that's why that's included in there. And then also just key to note that what it is that I'm hoping we're able to move forward with is something that's asking for that work plan to come back to council. So whether there's a financial implication or a consultant that needs to come in or the scope of the work or the specifics of it, I'd love to hear from planning what that could look like. And then we will still have an opportunity before it proceeds with being able to comment on it at that time, what we think is feasible and what the best course of action is.
Councillor Stewart, as the seconder, do you wish to speak to it?
I had a lot of things to point out, but Katie went through most of them in a different order, so I'm just trying to gather my my thoughts here. But I actually, one thing that sticks out to me is that our idea here is for any of our village cores, densify. We've talked about that. Everybody's talked about that. Number one, that's going to protect further sprawl, which is obviously important to us here in this township. But I looked through, and I was just zooming through maps, images of other rural towns in the different municipalities that, at least to me, they've done it wrong or didn't have the opportunity, missed the opportunity, whatever it was. You know, and I'm thinking of places, Dorchester, Thorndale, not as big maybe as Dorchester, Ilderton. Like, these places seem to just strictly stick to urban sprawl. I can't see any height. I can't see any density. And I wonder if they had the conversation early on, they maybe identified barriers that scared them off, both from a you know, a servicing perspective, a emergency services perspective when you're talking about heights. All these things are reasons to shy away from it, but at the end of the day, I think we have to be very in-depth knowledgeable about what the challenges are going to be as we continue to grow. Even traffic as well. Like, we need to know, as this village gets bigger and more densified, what is that going to do to traffic flow? How can we create an area that feels like a downtown on a busy road like County Road number 2? Those types of factors are what I hope we are able to scope out as something we want to identify, and then really tailor what we're expecting from a development based on that. I think that's it.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with everything that both of them said. They were well thought out and excellent points. But to me, this is the role of government. We're not here to build stuff. We are building two big buildings for our own use, so we can serve the people of the township. But it's not up to us to build businesses and that type of infrastructure. Our job is to facilitate private business coming and to be proactive to doing it. And Rhonda talked about a lack of land that's ready to go. So we want to be ready to go so that when people, business people, whether they're building residential or some type of commercial, they come to us and say, we want to buy this piece of land, or we have this piece of land and this is what we want to do with it. And we want to be in a position to say, no, we already thought about that. It's ready to go. Here's what you need. Talk to planning, talk to building, get your permits, and get going. And that's going to make us attractive to these people to come to us, because one of the big complaints where the province has brought down all this legislation is, one of their complaints is it takes forever to get anything done. If we can be the township, the community that gets things done, we're going to attract these people. We're going to develop it the way the people of this township who have put us in these seats want it done, and we're going to have it done in a good process. So I think being proactive is what we're here for, and this is certainly a proactive measure, and I fully support going ahead with this. And as I say, everything that my fellow councilors said, I endorse 100%.
Anyone else? Councillor Finch.
These guys all kind of covered everything that I have here. But again, we talked about densification in our election, and I think here we are jumping on top of it and being proactive, and I'm happy to see that Embro was put into that. Thank you.
There's a time for a mayor to talk and there's a time for a mayor to shut up. So the only thing I'm going to add is I really want to thank Deputy Mayor Grigg for crafting this motion to get this done. I want to thank Councillor Finch for taking the initiative to put her hand up behind the scenes and say, Embro should be included in this, because I think that's absolutely appropriate. It'll be in a different way. It'll be a different discussion. There'll be different land use needs. That community will have a different desire for how it's going to develop. And so I think that's all I'm going to say. Anybody else before I call the question? Do you want me to read it again? No other questions for Dawn? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Dawn. And 10, boards and committees, Cultural Mapping Task Force, January 10 meeting highlights. Does anybody have any questions on that one? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that item 10A be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to it? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 11 information items. So I have a motion here to receive and file A through D. Does anybody want to do anything different than that? Anybody want to speak to any of those before I read the motion or anything? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that items 11A through D be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. No unfinished business, no motions of motion, no bylaws, items of community interest, and the calendar. So, when I look at the calendar after today, I see there's a retirement event for outgoing MP Dave McKenzie on Saturday afternoon in Woodstock. For anyone who's interested. County Council next Wednesday. Ember Legion brunch on Sunday the 12th, and then back here on the 15th at 6 p.m. Did I miss anything there? Anybody got anything else they want to add?
Tonight, February the 1st, is part of the Browns Corner Wisdom Wednesday speaking series at the Browns Corner School. Speaker is Barb Yates. The topic is research regarding public trust in the Canadian food system. And on Monday, February the 13th, there's a HACA meeting at 7 p.m.
Alicia, did you have something?
Cultural mapping task force meeting is this Thursday. And the Zorra Multi-Use Courts Committee meeting is next Tuesday the 7th.
Okay.
I don't really know that this is for here, but Leanne and David are both coming to Zorra, our TVDSB, to just answer questions from the community, which I think is awesome. Is that something I've
It is excellent to have engaged trustees.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
On Monday the 6th, Calathumpian is hosting, sorry, I shouldn't say hosting, they're holding a planning meeting for their 2023 Calathumpian. I don't know details on the time or location, but they generally post those on their Facebook account. And then we also have a Beachville District Museum meeting on Wednesday night at 7. What did I say? Oh, sorry, I didn't say a number. Sorry, my apologies. Wednesday the 8th, yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Then, I think all that's left is confirmatory, and we're done. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that bylaw 06-23, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held February 1st, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time this February 1st, 2023, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 10:40 a.m. And the next meeting of council be called for February 15th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m. in the council chambers. That's not right, is it? 6 p.m. Sorry. 6 p.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. All those in favor? Opposed?